Morning. Like I said, we're going to wrap up chapter 6, page 13 on the study guide. There's a new handout for chapter 7. All right, under the something further to think about, what is a valuable takeaway from the account concerning Herod and John the Baptist? Yeah, one of those. Don't make promises unless you know what you're making a promise for. Right? Got himself into trouble. What other valuable lesson can we take from that account? All right, yeah, John the Baptist did not waver in his faith. He was willing to risk prison and death rather than forsake the word of the Lord. You know, because we're not told that John was always in Herod's face about this. But Herod enjoyed listening to John, and so John took the opportunity. So there's a good, valuable lesson as we have the opportunity. The person may not necessarily agree with us, but if they give us the opportunity to talk, we talk. Again, we speak the truth in love. We can still be poignant in speaking the truth. Any other valuable lessons to take from that? A couple more you could come up with.
Did Jesus refer to John the Baptist as the greatest prophet?
And then John would deflect to the fact that the one greater than I am is here. Right? But Jesus did refer to John the Baptist as a great prophet. Yep.
And what kind of dance did she do to get him to give half of his kingdom?
Yeah, we don't know exactly. You can use your imagination and come close. Okay, don't use your imagination. Right. So again, which goes back to be careful what you promise, and then careful who your friends are. Right. So he's knows who he's hanging around with. Right. So he's already immoral, but he's also hanging around immoral people, and then it just doubles the immorality, and then it leads to severe consequences. And so another lesson is just keep in mind actions have consequences. His affair had a consequence, and then from that affair came another consequence, and the ultimate consequence being most likely he gone for all eternity, away from God.
There's nothing worse than a woman's scold.
Right?
Herodias kind of kills.
Yeah, right? She did not like. So who are you getting your advice from? Right?
Well, I just think that it shows you that one sin leads to another sin to another sin. And is one worse than the other, or it just snowballs.
Right. Right. So yeah, how just that whole snowball effect of sin and the influence that family members can have. And if we're not thinking straight, like Herod wasn't thinking straight, and that led to consequences. So again, reminder for us too. You think of oftentimes in a mixed marriage, faith marriage, instead of being the influencer, you end up being influenced. You hope to be the influencer. And Paul addresses that in Corinthians, right, when he says, as long as you get opportunity to be an influencer, great, stick with it. But, as soon as that person decides to leave, well, then that's on them. But you want to be an influencer as long as you can. But too often, unfortunately, we see the influencer being influenced by another influencer. All right, next one. Why aren't people flocking to Jesus today, or are they? More interested in themselves, okay, that's part of it. We've always been interested in ourselves.
Depends where you are. You can see overseas. Look at our missions over in Africa and in Asia. They're flocking to them. Why not him? We're fat, dumb, and happy. He's given us everything, and we think we've done it.
Right? So, yeah, a gluttony on our part, a laziness on our part. The gospel is taking root across the world. Again, there's billions in the world, a fraction would be identified as Christians. So we get too easy, we get soft, we neglect where our blessings come from.
I read a report, I think it's accurate, that there are more Lutherans in Nigeria than in the United States.
More
I think I saw that, I was surprised by it.
More Christians in Nigeria? Well, I know in Africa, Lutherans.
I have to look that up, but look it up, I think you'll find it.
Okay.
In Africa.
I know the Lutheran Church of Africa is outnumbering our Lutheran Church here in America. Yeah, definitely. And again, this is not just a Wells problem or a Lutheran problem. This is a church problem in the U.S. The distractions, the laziness, the getting comfortable, blindness to the truth, distractions. We definitely are more distracted. There's more information available today. I mean, the church used to be the seat of communication and entertainment, and that's not the case any longer. And then we've touched on it before. Some churches now have become entertainment, and so after a while, that just kind of wears off. It's more of a social club, and so you got to put more emphasis on all the social entities, functions that you do. Think of the false shepherds that have arisen. Definitely easier to access with our phones, the technology, and so that prosperity gospel ministry is easier to access. So I think where we can, but it's nothing new that people have been falling away from the church. So what's the solution? Pray. Yep. There's plenty of articles being written about the demise of the church today, and how we've said before too, we're not a seeking church generation. We're past that, and so don't expect people to come to the church or even church events. And it's not just the church. And talking to the chamber here, I mean, people aren't showing up for events there either. The community events as much. It's just the mindset we're in. So instead of expecting droves to come to you, what do we need to do? Which is nothing new. Go to them. And it is relational. It starts in the home. And then branches out in the workplace. And as we have opportunity, as we touched on last week, how to be missional. Right? It's not doing this for Jesus. It's doing this with Jesus. And every opportunity is a mission opportunity.
Today's Wells connection that we watched at the end of the service, that could be a nice thing, maybe for someone who might not be here to see, and I'm pretty sure you can access it on the Wells website.
Yeah, I mean, right? So everybody has access to that. You can, just like those videos we talked about, we have videos that you can take, drop them off. Hey, can you take some time to watch this video? I'll be back. Watch it with them. I mean, it's being intentional about building up a relationship. Maybe it's somebody who's fallen away. What can you do to be intentional about that? Instead of too often we make excuses. Well, they're getting their career started and they're getting their family started. And so we end up making excuses for our children. But in a sense, we're excusing them all the way into hell. Like someone once said, Christians were sliding the hell in our butts. We would do this, but we would do that, but we got time for everything else, but the Lord. And so it's time to stop making excuses, and the good that I ought to do and want to do, well, do it. So if there's somebody you want to talk to, find a way to talk to them. Maybe it's a video, maybe it's a brochure, just to get the conversation started. The last one there, how many readings of the Bible and God-led interventions in our life does it take to trust God completely? Yeah, as a human being, not enough, right? We can never read the Bible enough. We can never stop learning lessons, and so he's continually teaching us lessons. How to stay connected to him, to see the importance of him, what we need to do. I mean, even as a church, right? When things are going well in the church, what tends to drop off? Attendance and outreach. Hey, if the pews are full, well, we don't have room for any more. But then what happens? Right? So now you got to reboot yourself. And it's kind of like the church too, who says, man, let's start a committee to see if we should do outreach. 6 months later, they got the committee together, and then 6 months after that, the committee determines, yes, we should do outreach. Well, let's put a committee together how we should do outreach. And 2 years later, you finally came up with the idea we should do outreach, and then we figured we should put some flyers in the neighborhood. But in 2 years, what's been missing? Just doing outreach. Chapter 7. Think of how many times Jesus had to teach the disciples the same lesson again and again and again. That book I mentioned last week too about being missional, again, just it reminded us of the fact that part of the situation is the church has to realize times have changed. The message doesn't change. How the church operates per se doesn't need to change, organ, keyboard, or whatever, but the times have changed. It's kind of like that 20 years ago, you could offer an event, people come to campus, you could connect with people that way. That's not the case anymore. So do you keep doing what you're doing and expect the same result, or a different result, or do you switch it up?
So the whole number of Lutherans or members here or elsewhere, we're seeing, and you talked about this before, that people are coming, but they're not committing to membership.
Right.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I mean, they're coming to hear.
Right. Yeah, I mean, on one hand, right, if people are interested, they're coming, they're not committing, we're interested ultimately for souls for heaven. Unfortunately, we humans base success, if you're a good pastor or congregation or not, how big your church is. So we want the commitment. We feel like if we don't get them as members, then we must have failed. But if they're in heaven, if they say they believe but they haven't joined the church, does that mean they're not going to be in heaven? So, you'd like to see people make a commitment. And membership is one of those ways that show we're committed not just to the church, but we're committed to the Lord, and we're showing that through our commitment to this congregation. So you can take it one way or the other. But I think part of that is we just got to get past, don't get so focused on numbers, but focused on the souls. Right? And we want to feed those souls as much as we can. So we want to keep encouraging them to come back, find that fine line of pushing them to join or not join. Go from there. Because sometimes we've encouraged pastors to say, don't get so caught up in the numbers. Just go and build relationships. Talk to people. That's hard for pastors to do. But I think if we can get members encouraged that way and pastors encouraged that way, because we've talked about resident missionaries, just call a pastor to just go in the community and talk to people. And train up people to be missionaries themselves. But that's a mind shift change, and that's what that book's talking about. We got to be willing to shift our mindsets, how we do church today. I think part of that too with the real life example here is like the community cook-off. It was meant to be kind of like with the fall harvest, different names it's had over the years, a fellowship event, a neighborhood block party, and so forth. But especially with COVID, that's changed mindsets on people getting together. And then just the whole church mindsets have changed. Is that something that maybe we don't do? We might do something else. Well, but we've always done it. But it's not. Is it really accomplishing what we need to do? That's why many congregations have stopped doing vacation Bible school. They're going to hell. No. If it's not accomplishing what you need to accomplish, but we've always done it that way. I don't know how many times I hear it. Well, so-and-so always did it. And the church still declined. Right? So that wasn't the ticket either. But we get so caught up in how we've always done it. Do you ever change and modify your house? Do you ever change styles of clothing? Does it change who you are necessarily? What? The word doesn't change, right? We always make that clear. We don't need to change the word, but how we communicate the word, that may have to. The Lord sometimes slaps us upside the head, gently but firmly.
I can't see younger generations ever being attracted to our liturgical services.
I wouldn't say that's true. I would say there are. It's not a detraction. Articles will say that too. Our liturgical worship is not necessarily a detraction for the younger people. In fact, younger people may appreciate it more than the 50-year-olds because they were the seeking generation. They wanted something different from their parents. And now this younger generation wants something different from their parents because their parents were kind of like this, where are our parents? So that's why like this latest book says, it's not the organ that's the turnoff. It's not liturgy that's the turnoff. Do it well, but be relational. You say we're I'm just using an example, I'm not pointing fingers here. You say you're a friendly church, but you don't talk to anybody in the lobby. A visitor will pick up on that. A young person will pick up on that. So you got to back up even more so the words with actions. Now, maybe not. Structure is important, right? I mean, there are expectations. Part of it, again, is how do you get them to see that God is important? I mean, last week, again, I heard of a person who wants to argue the fact that religion is worthless. Person's all ready to argue that fact. How do you get people interested in God, that God has a role in their life? And these are people who have some have even grown up in the church, who have now decided God is not valuable in my life. And for some of us, it's like, can't even think that way. And not everybody has to think that way. But for those who are trying to reach out to those who are thinking that way, don't criticize them. Encourage them. Pray for them. Maybe you don't understand where they're coming from, but pray for those who are trying to understand where they're coming from.
I think over the years, anything I've learned is people don't care how much you know. They want to know that you care.
That's the old axiom, right? People don't care how much you know unless they know you care.
It took me forever to learn that.
Right.
I figured, I've got to tell everybody what I know.
Well, at the same time, not coming across as a know-it-all, right? I mean, part of it is how you engage people today. You may know the answer, but you ask questions. You may come across like, boy, that person doesn't know much, but so be it. But if you just went out and said something to somebody, would you engage them in conversation versus asking them a question? And now you get them to answer. And then it gives you another chance to come up with another question. So it's not trying to tell people how smart you are. It's trying to have somebody get them to talk. How can we get people to talk? You know, that's why I do, if I can, to engage those who have fallen away. Help me understand where you're coming from. I even buy the dinner.
Someone cannot dispute what you yourself have found to be true. So if you share, this is what God has meant in my life, it's not like you're preaching at them, but you're saying, this is what I have learned to be true. And sharing your faith with them rather than trying to argue their way in. That is the only way that I can approach things. It's just, this is what I have found to be true in my life, and I hope that you can see that.
Right? Good approach. Right? This is what I find to be important in my life, and here's why.
What their experience is.
Right.
It is.
And to your point, too, what did Jesus encourage us to do? To be genuine. Right? Humble, genuine, transparent.
That's hard.
Right? So, I mean, when Jesus even confronted the sinners, he already had relationship with them too, and how he confronted them. There are lessons for us to learn.
Oh, he didn't get into debates. He just said it like it was.
Right. Sometimes are we looking for the debate?
When we talk about this, remember the old Tiffany method of evangelizing, when you go out, today you get a strange answer, like who cares?
Right.
You know what we'd ask if you died? So the whole narrative has changed, so you have to look at it differently. I mean, you could get a response 20 years ago. Today, you get this blind look, so you have to come at it a whole lot different.
Right. So that's a good transition to clean and unclean. What has changed? What has not changed? Right. So let's look at. Yes, sir.
I think, Francis, Jesus didn't debate. He debated all over the place.
He
He didn't get into it. He didn't get into a debate like this is right, this is wrong. He just said it like it was. He didn't get up there and
Because
argue
he was
about
right,
it.
and they were wrong.
Exactly. But he didn't sit there and argue about it. And I'm not arguing with you in a minute.
I mean, we don't have a dialogue of Jesus sitting there debating. I mean, he pretty much shut him down.
I mean, he was always
But he would do it in a way like with a we'll see. He did it with a question. And
Came up with a way for Jesus to teach them. They always had to say, what about this?
right, and so that's what always made the Pharisees mad, because Jesus did not get into those debates with them. He would shut them down with a question, and then if they answered it one way, that got him in trouble. If they answered this way, that would get him in trouble. And so, it's how you look at it. Semantics. Great.
I want to weigh in on that question of religion.
Yes.
Because to me, religion is like an armor. It can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. There's so many definitions of where they come from. For us, what really matters is our faith. So if someone were to say, religious is meaningless, I might even be able to agree with that.
Sure.
But I said, everything matters is faith. Because that is upon which we stand, and that is the foundation of our life that we live in Christ.
But I could say I have faith in what?
Well, in anything, right? But I have faith in the living Lord. There is only one true faith.
So eventually getting to that. You're right, though, right? You can find points to agree with to keep that conversation going. We agree. Religion in and of itself is worthless. God will even make that statement, right? Faith in and of itself, if it's not in the right thing, what's the object of your faith? Christianity. Christianity can be a sham. Not biblical Christianity, but earthly Christianity, right? So we can agree with those points. All right, now I'll get him to think about biblical Christianity, the object of my faith. That's good points, right?
And
So
if we have a religion, if somebody sees religion in us, it's merely a reflection of faith.
yeah. Because what is religion? We would say too, Christianity is not religion. Christianity is a way of life. It's not just a set of rules to live by. It's more than that. Yeah. So that goes back to the apologetics, right? Not only do we need to be ready to talk about our faith, but even to defend our faith, to take it deeper. All right, the clean and unclean, as we look at the chapter 7, looking at the questions on page 14, what had the Pharisees and the teachers of the law taken issue with Jesus this time? Washing hands, right? How could he allow his disciples to eat food without washing their hands first? Now, was Jesus against good hygiene? No. But eating food with unclean hands, dirty hands, that wasn't a sin in of itself. And so then we get into defining tradition, right? A handing down of beliefs or customs, a long established way of thinking and acting.
Pastor,
Yes.
it says they wash their hands with a ceremonial washing. Is that different than just washing your hands?
Yes.
Kind of a ceremony.
Yeah, but I mean, with the intent of we are offering ourselves to the Lord through this food that we eat. Tradition in of itself, as we'll look at, is not the issue. It's how we use those traditions. That's what Jesus was getting at. And so now define hypocrite, one who pretends to be something they're not. Even the Pharisees at times were being hypocritical. That's why Jesus would point out to them. You have all these rules and expectations which you burden the people's conscience with, but you yourselves don't always follow these expectations that you've come up with. So they were being hypocritical. I'll finish the thought then in connection with verses 6 to 8, having a form of godliness, but denying its power. All right, so you have this show of godliness, of doing the right thing, but it to Greg's point there too, it's really empty. You have this religion, but it doesn't point to Christ. It doesn't offer hope or peace or forgiveness. It just offers more guilt. And that's what the Pharisees were good at, offering more guilt because you didn't keep these traditions that they had come up with.
Well, he points out that your thing here, the traditions are man-made.
Yes.
And they're not from him. He said that his worshiping has come from the heart.
Right.
And traditions are just
Sure. Yeah, we can, styles of worship are debatable, right? And one group of people may be comfortable with this style, another group comfortable with that style, not one wrong over the other, as long as the focus is on Christ and leads all to Christ. So again, Jesus was emphasizing too, it's not just going through the motions, not just washing your hands that makes a person clean, but it's what's in the heart.
Jesus said, honor me with your lips, but your heart is far from me.
Right? And that was too often the case. And so even here we want to be careful too. It's not just coming to church that we can check off, but are we there with the heart too? Yeah, that's what he wants, the heart. John 6, 28 and 29. In Romans 3, 28, Colossians 2, 13. If we could just have those passages looked up and ready to go. John 6, 28 and 29, first of all. Anybody have that, Greg?
Then they asked him, what must we do to do the works that God requires? Jesus answered, the work of God is this, to believe in the one he has sent.
So what's the question? What do I have to do? Has that changed? No. And the answer? Believe. That hasn't changed either, right? But we still tend to think we have to do something, but rather believe in what, and that's what he brings about as well, the ability to believe. Romans 3:28.
For we maintain that a person is justified by faith apart from the works of the law.
Okay, can we be saved by our works? No. What's the purpose of works? Show faith that we believe, right? We are justified not by law, but by what Christ has done. Right? So it doesn't get any clearer than that. It's not this ceremonial washing that makes us clean. Colossians 2, 13 to 23, Jen.
When you were dead in your sins and in the uncircumcision of your flesh, God made you alive with Christ. He forgave us all our sins, having canceled the charge of our legal indebtedness, which stood against us and condemned us. He has taken it away, nailing it to the cross. And having disarmed the powers and authorities, he made a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them by the cross. Therefore, do not let anyone judge you by what you eat or drink, or with regard to a religious festival, a new moon celebration, or a Sabbath day. These are a shadow of the things that were to come. The reality, however, is found in Christ. Do not let anyone who delights in false humility and the worship of angels disqualify you. Such a person also goes into great detail about what they have seen. They are puffed up with idol notions by their unspiritual mind. They have lost connection with the head, from whom the whole body is supported and held together by its ligaments and sinews, grows as that causes it to grow. Since you died with Christ to the elemental spiritual forces of this world, lives that you still belong to the world, you submit to its rules. Do not handle, do not taste, do not touch. These rules, which have to do with things that are all destined to perish with use, are based on merely human rules and teachings. Such regulations indeed have an appearance of wisdom, but their self-imposed worship, their false humility, and their harsh treatment of the body, they lack any value in restraining sensual indulgence.
All right, so a couple things to jump out at us there. First of all, what's our status by nature? Dead in sin. So what's the implication of that? We need revival, right? And who brings that about? Jesus, right? So if we're dead in sin, we cannot make our decision to have Jesus enter our life, right? So decision theology. We've said this before. Just make sure we say it again. We're not saying those who make their decision for Jesus are not Christians. They just are mistaken about how they have become one with Christ. Not by their choosing, but by God's doing. And then he builds on that. What is Jesus set free from? The demands of the law, right? You must do this. You must do that. He gives us proper motivation. It was always the proper motivation, even in the Old Testament. It was just more visual, reminder that they were imperfect and they needed a go-between to approach a holy God. We are more have the emphasis on the fact that Jesus has come and has served as that go-between and brings us to the presence of a holy God. And what's the purpose of all those Old Testament laws and ceremonies today? There's no purpose for them anymore. They've been fulfilled. Right? They served their purpose in drawing the attention on our need for a Savior and who the Savior is in Jesus. And so then when it comes to having this service or that service or worshiping this time or that time, Jesus says, don't get caught up in those debates. Satan wants you to argue about what day you worship or what festival you worship. So make sure we're worshiping for the right reason. Someone once said the only reason why Advent services were started is because the church was short of offerings. No, not saying that's the case, but that'd be the wrong motive for having extra services. What excuse, back to Mark, what excuse were some people using for not taking care of the needs of the family? Yeah, we're giving it all to the church, Lord, so why should you be unhappy about that? But Jesus also has given us the responsibility to care for the needs of our own family. So people were good about taking care of their own needs. They would then, give to the church, but they were neglecting another law of love that God had in place. And so there's a balance that is to take place. Same on the flip side, if you say, well, I have nothing to give to the church because I'm taking care of my family. And Jesus would say, I give you all that you need. I mean, we even, we tell 7th and 8th graders, right? I mean, you make, this is low, right? Let's just round numbers, $10, babysitting. Right? Well, I can't give anything to church. Well, can't you? 10%, $1? Again, it doesn't seem much, but it's the attitude behind the gift. Again, even the Lord says it's not the amount, because he doesn't demand of us what he does not provide in the first place. But if we can't even show anything towards him and towards others, then what are we saying to God? Right? But it's kind of like in Malachi. Our house has the cedar closets, while God's house falls apart, or your neighbor's house is decaying. Again, there's a balance in there. According to Jesus, what is it that makes a person unclean? Yeah, because what comes out of the heart? Where does evil thoughts come from? From the heart. Murder and sexuality and so forth like that. So he reminds us it's not the eating of food with unclean hands, even though it's a good practice to get into, wash your hands. What evidence is there to back up these words of Jesus? If you look at verses 21 to 23, you see the evidence there. People want to know, why is Oakland the way it is? Why are homes fighting? Why are people falling away from the church, right? All that comes from the heart, and if it's not curbed, it only gives more evidence of evil. Have you heard people ask that question? Why why are people evil? Why is this happening? It's like they're ignorant of sin, the sin in their own heart. But they have their sin in their own heart, but then they don't think there's going to be sin in the other person's heart. And if you don't curb sin in your own heart, if you don't curb sin in the hearts of others, so for those who are trying to get rid of the law in our land, what's that going to lead to? Yeah, chaos, right? More evil. And then sometimes you got to wonder, what is the goal of those who are trying to get rid of all the laws in our land? You have to live in this place too, don't you? Someone once answered me that when I asked that question of them, they said, but they think they're above it. They won't be impacted by it. And how does original sin enter this conversation? Well, what do we need to admit?
Where does your heart come from? It's inside. That's where the defiling comes. You've already been born with it.
Okay, that's the key, right? We're all born with it. We're all starting out in that same boat of original sin. Thus why evil exists and why it's prevalent. And then why Jesus has given us the Great Commission too. Why it's important. We need that law to be convicted in our sin. So he's given us the law to convict others in their sin. He's given us the gospel, not only for ourselves, but also the gospel to share, to point out forgiveness. And then what important point does Mark stress to both Jew and Gentile reader? Think of verse 19, and then also Acts 10. Jesus makes that point to Peter. All food is clean, right? Acceptable. Now, people may hold on to their traditions about certain foods. Some people don't want to eat pork. That's their right. To burden the conscience of somebody else now goes too far. Just kind of like what in the Catholic Church, right? Fridays, it was considered a venial sin to eat meat on Fridays. Now it's okay. Some dioceses you can have corned beef on St. Patty's Day, and some dioceses you can't. All depends if the Archbishop has given the blessing to eat corned beef in that diocese or not. So what would Jesus have to say about that? Eating corned beef or not eating corned beef doesn't bring you any closer to God. May keep you away from your family for a while, but it doesn't bring you closer to God. Yes.
You said that the eating fish on Friday came about because the fish market was really hurting in Italy at one time.
So it was a way to help the fish market. Yeah. Could be. You gonna stick with it? All right, we're gonna stop there. Keeping in mind the whole point of Mark. Mark is pointing out that Jesus is the true God and true man as promised. That he has come to save us from our sins. And what is sin? And now how to live a life with sin not getting the upper hand. And that's what he continues to make the point and drive home to us. All right. Blessings on your day as you continue to honor your traditions while at the same time not being distracted from Christ. Have a good week.